In our session a few minutes before this, you shared a little bit, speaking of rock and roll, you shared a little bit about why the guitar and how it got chosen. Would you mind telling that story again?
You mean where we went to choose it? No, it's all just the guitar.
Yeah, why the guitar and then where you went?
Just after we finished my first season, I put together a little email. I got some ideas and things that I thought the Doctor might be able to do, and one of them was play the electric guitar, because I always thought it'd be great when you saw the TARDIS spinning through space. You'd hear these power, smoke on the water or something like that. Just for fun, and then he'd have some giant amp that he made himself from all valves and stuff like that, and then he'd be the guy who introduced Jimi Hendrix to feedback and stuff. So we didn't go with all that, but they said, yeah, we think you should have a guitar. And then I opened the script, and every episode I'd have a guitar, and I'd be playing music and stuff. And of course, there'd be songs that I'd have to learn how to play. So that was very exciting for me, because I got to play these versions of various songs, most of which got cut out. But of course, when you do, I play them on the set, and I sort of do okay. But then when I see them on the show, it's like Eddie Van Halen or someone else plays them or something. So obviously there's a guitar pixie again to come and do stuff. But the best day ever was when they said, well, you've got to go and buy the Doctor's guitar. So I had to think about what guitar would the Doctor have. And so I thought, well, they should have something fairly classic, like a Fender. This is for the guitar geeks, like a Fender Stratocaster or a Telecaster or something, maybe a Les Paul. But when I went to the guitar, they took me to this road in Soho, which is just full of all vintage guitars. It was a brilliant, it's one of the best days of my life. Here's the guitar shop. You can try all of these, and one of them will be yours. But every time I tried on the Stratocaster or the Telecaster, I looked like a guy who was having like a kind of midlife crisis. I always wanted to play the guitar, but I never got around to it. So now I'm like 58, and I saved up a lot of money, and I'm going to buy a guitar. What kind of guitar should I get? Okay, strap the guitar. Where are my leather trousers? Skip my leather trousers. And my motorbike, I'm going wild. So that's how I looked when I had the Stratocaster. So let's not do that. And then in the corner I saw this weird guitar that looked like someone had described a Fender Stratocaster to someone who had never seen one. And who didn't have a picture of one. And so made a guitar that they thought looked like this description they'd heard of a Fender Stratocaster, which is a little bit 50s, with some wings on it and stuff. And I thought, that's perfect. That looks like the Doctor made it himself. So that's the one, which is actually a Yamaha guitar, which is not that old, but it's great. And of course, the funny thing is you have the guitar on the set, we have it in the TARDIS. It's always there, even if we don't use it, and everybody plays it. You turn around and somebody's playing Stairway to Heaven or something over there, Smoke on the Water over there. It's great fun. It's awesome.
Have you ever met anyone from the show that you just completely were starstruck over?
From the show? I've met, when I was very young, I met, it wasn't technically, well, it depends where you stand, it wasn't technically Doctor Who. But I met Peter Cushing, Star Wars, who was in Star Wars, but was well known to me growing up because he was in a lot of horror movies. I'm sure that's why he was in Star Wars, because I think George Lucas and Steven Spielberg loved the work of Hammer Pictures, and Peter Cushing was one of the stars of, and of course he played the Doctor in the big movie versions of Doctor Who. But I remember, and it's pertinent to this kind of experience here of coming to a big sort of fan convention. He was like opening a charity event in my hometown, and there was a very small queue of people, a small line, about half a dozen of us, because they didn't do things like this. And he signed an autograph for me. He gave me, they didn't sell autographs or anything in those days. They just gave me this 10 by 8 photograph of himself, and he signed it. and signed his name. And I love this autograph so much. I based my own autograph on his. Because he has the same initials. He's Peter Cushing, and I'm PC also. And he was absolutely charming, so that was lovely.
Thank you.
But there's a kind of essence. Sometimes you'll find an essence of something that is from an old movie, like what we've just. There's been an essence of kind of the Night of the Hunter has been sort of around a little bit. And I remember when we did Heaven Sent, that was very much a kind of. I was on the set one day and I thought this was really. There was something that was familiar to me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I realised it. I said, "If this is like a Roger Corman movie, you know, I don't mean." Cheap and quick.
Quick and done in 5 days.
Mask of the Red Death kind of things.
There was something about the actual
Poe.
visual sensibility of it. There was like one of those kind of 50s, early 60s Roger Corman American horror movies where they try to do. I love when they do, you know, haunted castles, like in California.
Yeah, his Edgar Allan Poe.
Californian Sunshine, and it was a bit like that. And Stephen, I think, revealed that that had gone through his head as well.
Absolutely.
Which actor do you do you most look up to in life?
There's so many wonderful actors. I think Anthony Hopkins is awe-inspiring and phenomenal. There was a wonderful actor that we just lost a few years ago called I won't go into that. I think he's wonderful. Gary Oldman, I think, is sensational. There's so many wonderful American actors. Jeffrey Tambor, I think, is one of the greatest actors ever. His ability to balance the comic with the tragic is absolutely extraordinary. Robert De Niro, of course. There are so many, but it doesn't even have to be someone famous. You can be sitting in a rehearsal room. We had a girl who came on Doctor Who to play. We had an episode called Knock Knock, in which there was the plot revolved around a girl who'd been turned into a kind of wooden creature, and this actress came and played this part with this heavy layers of latex all over her. You couldn't see her face, you didn't know what she looked like. She was sensational. You know, and you think, I really admire that. So it can be anybody, it doesn't have to be somebody famous. Just people who do their best and are nice.
One thing that sets Doctor Who apart from a lot of other great roles, you have 12 actors play Hamlet, they all give the same speech. And each Doctor has had his own unique material, and your speech to the Zygons is something people have been taking to conventions and asking other doctors to read. My question is, as a fan of the show, as an actor who's watched the show for all these years, have there been any speeches other doctors have gotten to deliver that you thought, man, that would be fun to play, or I think I could knock that one out of the park?
I think it's not so much that you think I can knock it out of the park or compete or sometimes there are speeches where you think it would be nice to have said that, but then you think, oh, I did.
Is there a moment in your run that you hope resonates with the fans, or one that when you filmed it thought, this is the one that is just that perfect moment, that magical moment that is just Doctor Who in every way, shape, and form?
It's a very, very good question.
I could ask a simpler one.
Well, it's quite a complex question because one answer there's some moments that you do that are just so Doctor Who that it couldn't be anything else, and just feels so right. And there's in the Magician's Apprentice, which is one of the Davros stories,
Right.
I escape from Davros's clutches with Jenna, and we burst into the Dalek control room, and I'm carrying a Dalek gun. And the control room's collapsing, and Daleks are screaming, and the TARDIS is over there, and we run into it. And that was just, that couldn't have been anything else. You know, it was just totally Doctor Who, and I loved it. There are more. I always like the fear is a superpower speech in Listen. I think that's a very powerful idea. And I have met a lot of people, particularly in the business of being at conventions and all that, which is a new thing, a fairly new thing to me, and I'll be at the convention later on this afternoon if anybody wants to come along for photos and autographs, etc.
We'll be there.
Because I don't have a job now, so.
Well, they still owe you money for that first regeneration, so.
The what?
They owe you money for the regeneration, so.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible. Let's hope we can get that money. I don't know how much you get paid for that. I'll have a word with Jodie Alaska to make sure that she gets paid. The fear is a superpower because in a way it's an echo of something that's said very early on in Doctor Who when it's said that fear makes companions of us all. Comes from a William Hartnell story. And Stephen has spun that into fear is a superpower. And at the conventions, I've often met people, not often, I've occasionally met people who have had tough things happen in their lives. And particularly, I met a very lovely lady who had her kids had some medical problems and had to have a lot of procedures. And she used that speech to help them.
Wow.
So I thought that's a pretty good thing to put into the world.
Thank you.
What about you? I mean, you of course did grow up watching it in the days before one could buy it on video or DVD.
Well, I think I have a slightly different take on it. It's not just on that, it's just on some kind of sense of creativity. Kind of slightly, I find it uncomfortable, the quantifying and filing of the past into very specific moments. It's like if you have a memory of, I found a pile of old photographs from my teenage years, and my concept of myself in my teenage years was far cooler than these photographs revealed. And I was both, I felt mature in accepting that, but also slightly saddened that the thing that had been in my head was erased by this. So I don't. I like the idea that the show gets lost, and I like the idea that creativity is fed by dim memories or abstractions or passions. Or I don't like everything, written down and filed, and so that's why I don't. Someone, rather primly said once that I was a fan of the show, but not a student.
Not a
which is probably
We
true.
were fighting.
So I think that's my take on it. Is I like it all being absorbed into a big muddle, a big cauldron of memory and artfulness.
Yes, what's your name and your question?
Andre?
Hi.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
This side.
Sorry.
Okay, I can't see. I thought he was doing that without moving his lips. He's a ventriloquist. You New Yorkers are so talented. Hi.
Hi, Peter.
Hello.
How did you feel when Clara slapped you right in the face?
I was horrified. Even in the script, I was like, are you kidding? The doctor's companion slaps him? I thought, that doesn't feel right somehow. But actually it did work because Jenna was so, she sort of takes care of business. And sometimes my doctor's quite serious and stuff like that, and it can be quite overwhelming. but sometimes it gets a little bit too excited. So sometimes somebody has to say, just behave. So I thought it was good. I thought it worked well.
Thank you.
But it was painful.
What do you think of Portland so far? Have you had a chance to explore, see anything?
Unfortunately, the major tourist sites were closed to us due to the unfortunate fire you had here. But you have spectacular coffee shops. And you have the best motto of any city I've ever been in. Keep Portland weak. And it's great to see you doing your civic duty.
The episodes with the monks, how did you feel about being blind? How was that for you?
Well, it was it's quite hard to act because they didn't do anything to my eyes. I thought they were going to do something like give me contact lenses or something like that would make my eyes all weird. But they didn't, because they run out of money. It's classic Doctor Who. So say, oh, you're blind. Just be blind. So I just do my poor Pearl would be. I'd be looking at Pearl, but then I think the director would say, you know, you've forgotten you're blind. So then I'd have to remember to not look at Pearl, but not look at her, kind of try and hear her voice and stuff. So it was a lot harder than I thought. I think Pearl had to put up with more from me in that, because I couldn't. Because you normally look in eyes, don't you? You normally look at each other.
And it's quite instinctive to do that as well. When you're talking to someone, you look in their eyes, and it's quite hard when they're kind of going.
The only way I can do this, being as I don't have any crazy special effect contact lenses since they couldn't afford, is to not look at it.
Yeah.
When you were a fan of the show growing up, did you ever think of any stories or scenarios that you would have liked to have seen the Doctor get into? And if you did, would any of them have worked for your Doctor in particular?
No, I never really. When I was a kid, I was always more interested in drawing and stuff, so I never really wrote stories and came up with ideas like that. I always thought. I know he had there's a brief appearance by the Beatles in Doctor Who, but I would think it would have been fun if in the 60s he could have had more of a relationship with the whole 60s thing. I mean, I always think, with my Doctor, I would have loved to have done an episode where he met Jimi Hendrix. You know, and Jimmy hadn't quite got it together really with his sound, and the Doctor was able to kind of invent a wah-wah pedal. I think that would have been really cool. Look at this. I made this from the TARDIS. And getting Jimmy to come into the TARDIS and plugging the guitar into the big panel and all that stuff. So yeah, but I don't know what monsters they'd be fighting. The flower people. They'd be killer flower people with great big petals on their heads. And this weird kind of ozone that's released that makes people go really trippy.
Thank you.
What should we call those trippy monsters? What do you think they would be called? Purple haze.
Fantastic. I have this image of you pitching this to Stephen Moffat and him saying, okay, we'll do the Mondasian Cyberman.
No.
All right.
Stephen would say, who's Jimi Hendrix? Not really.
Do you know, I remember being in Austria and we were watching Doctor Who dubbed into German, and I was simultaneously translating it back into English for my children while watching it, and it was really weird because you could see how the Germans would be interpreted. It was in Cyberman episode, and it was also in London where they had the Bluetooth kind of phone thing. And I actually realised, oh my God, I know how the Germans see this, and it's sort of Doctor Who, and yet it's not quite the same.
Well, it's very tricky. We went to Berlin to do some publicity, which is quite rare for us to go to Germany. Because the show, I don't know how big the show is there.
I think it's very big.
Yeah. But so I had to meet some German journalists. And the very first question that the journalist said to me was, is it true that the Daleks are based on the Nazis? And I thought, who do I offend?
What did you say? Yes.
I had to say yes, I think that they were, and hope that it didn't offend either them or the Daleks.
The fact that they even had to ask. No, the Germans would have loved that.
But it's like, don't mention the war. Wham! Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh, we have a TARDIS over here.
Wow, I've been looking for you everywhere.
Hello. I gotta say, you starred in one of my all-time favorite episodes of Doctor Who, Heaven Sent. Great episode, but I have to ask, you have up to this point, probably in the close future, have played the Doctor outside the TV show, outside the TV show, like on radio shows and video games and such. Do you have any particular favorite of those roles or jobs?
What do you mean, I've played the Doctor outside of the TV show?
Like in video games and stuff.
No, I don't like doing any of those. Because they put you in a studio and they just give you the video game's not made, everything else is not made, and they just give you a list of words to say and lines, and you don't see anything. You just got to throw yourself into it with no other actors and stuff. So I never see it until it's done. So I haven't seen any of them. So I prefer playing the Doctor for real in the middle of a battle with an alien threat. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was the most interesting episode to film in the 9th season?
In the 9th season?
Yes. Or
Well,
run in general?
they're all very interesting because they all have their own specific problems. But I guess in that one, the most complex one was the one with me in it, which was with only me. It was Heaven Sent, which was a beautiful script and fantastically directed by Rachel Talalay, who is an absolutely sensational director. And who was absolutely the real thing, an artist, a filmmaker. So that was fascinating because she came to that with very little time on the script because the script was a little late, but because she's very, very gifted, she brought a great visual and filmic sensibility to it and an understanding of trying to make sequences that were fascinating and arresting and trying to tell this quite deep and strange story. But also, she was the only person I had to talk to because there were no other actors there. Obviously the crew were there, they were great because I loved being around them. So that was hard because you get fed up listening to your own voice. And you suddenly realize how lucky you are to have other actors around because they'll add another colour or another piece of energy or another piece of another gag or something, and that makes it all keep rolling along. You're a bit frightened when it's just yourself and you think this is going to be very dull. But she did it beautifully, so that was great. That was, I guess, the most challenging one. But it's always a challenge in some way or another, particularly if a monster shows up that's not as cosmic as it should be. It begins falling to pieces,
Yeah.
Like
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
I was wondering, obviously Doctor Who has some amazing storylines for the season finales. I wanted to know which one you enjoyed the most filming, basically, and why.
Of mine?
Yeah, of the three you did.
I've liked them all very much, but I liked Hell Bent because I got to run around an old TARDIS and have a nice long black frock coat on. And throw switches, and also do the wonderful scene with Jenna when we decided, when we had a go at wiping each other's memories, which I think she did beautifully, and was very sad. And I thought she brought such grace and heart to that. So I enjoyed that very much. And also Rachel directed that, so it looked amazing. Thank you.
Over the years, since you've been the Doctor, you've appealed to a certain audience. And I want to know, over in America, we call somebody like that a silver fox. about you like that.
Well, I'm a little shocked. It's not really the way I would see myself at all. I'm grateful that people find me interesting in any way. I would accept that, we just think you look a little funny. But I'm just very lucky that I have my wonderful wife. And she still likes me, so that's important.
Well, thank you. We are so blessed to have had you as our doctor.
Thank
We will miss you.
What does your wife think of all this just crazy fandom? Everything that comes with the Manitoba Doctor Who, what does she think of it all?
She was never interested in Doctor Who. Like a lot of men, it was a secret thing that I was into, and she never really, she didn't really, she found it mildly embarrassing, kind of. And I would still be interested, I'd come home with a Doctor Who magazine. What's that you got there? It's nothing, darling. Are you reading those Doctor Who magazines again? I think she's, we're both blessed really to have this amazing life that the show has given us. So, but she knows much more about Doctor Who now than she ever did before.